Welcome to A Woman's Voice, Empowerment Radio, where your voice is heard. Featuring your host, Christy Lee Tritz, international best-selling author, inspirational speaker, and women's empowerment coach. Christy Lee supports women to no longer live in silence, to find their voices and to have those voices heard to create change. Christy Lee's guests will inspire you, empower you, and show you how to overcome obstacles in your life. Guests will be sharing their stories of survival, how they moved through addiction, going from fear to empowerment, and how they came from silence to sharing their voices and being heard. Christy Lee will also be showcasing professionals who will give you powerful tools to move from where you are to where you want to be. Get ready to be encouraged and inspired. And now, here's your host, Christy Lee Tritz.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today, I'd like to start with a little inspirational quote. In the moment of crisis, the wise build bridges, and the foolish build dams. A Nigerian proverb. The first anthology in A Woman's Voice collection has begun, and I am looking for inspiring and empowering women's voices to be a part of this life-changing project. If you or someone you know would like to learn more about co-authoring in this book, reach out to me via Facebook or email at contact@ChristyLeeTritz.com. And now I'm excited because today's show will be featuring the voice of our first male guest. His name is Larry Hochman. He's been one of the mainstays in online training and development for years. He is a professional counselor, author, trainer, coach, and entertainer. Welcome to the show, Larry.
Pleasure to be here, Christy. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So, could you tell us a little bit about your background first?
I am absolutely, I look at this now and get the benefit of 48 years of experience on this earth. And every once in a while, I look and I say, how the heck did this happen? I'm not just talking about the male pattern and baldness either. I honestly, and you know, it's not the first time I'm asked that question. And believe it or not, that's actually one of the hardest to answer. I don't know how I got here. I guess I'm the product of two loving parents. If you look at where some of the trainers and the coaches that we know where they came from. You know, they came from addiction and they came from some really, really difficult circumstances. That doesn't describe me at all. You know, my sister and I were raised by two loving parents who are still around. I just got back from spending a few days with them in Florida. None of the quote-unquote bad stuff ever happened. I think a lot of people who are struggling to find their confidence can relate to that, as opposed to some of the trainers who have struggled with, you know, the biggies, the drug addiction, the homelessness, the life-threatening illness, that kind of stuff. I felt things slip away a little bit by little bit. I entered middle-class America as a high school guidance counselor, married my college sweetheart, did all the right stuff, and just felt it kind of slip away. And then at some point, and it's a long, convoluted story, but at some point I just kind of made a decision that there was more to this whole life experience than I'd been giving myself permission to live, and picked up a few tricks along the way, watched my wife do some incredible things, and I said, I think I'd like to try something different in the next half of my life, and kind of got my confidence back, and picked up a place where I wouldn't have visualized myself 20 years ago, but it's been a blessing, and it's been a thrill ride for the last few years.
Yeah, that sounds like that. And congratulations on, you know, being married for so long. It's not something that you get to see very often, and you really support your wife. I hear that in what you're saying. How do you think your background has helped you help people find their confidence?
Well, I think for all of us, there's a certain level you can go to where you help people, and when you don't relate to them, that's where the water, that's where you kind of come to the water's edge. But certainly a background working with vulnerable kids, that helps, because you have to try and see things through their eyes. It's one thing to look at what we're all doing and to filter it through your own frame of reference. and then give what you think is good advice. But if they don't understand what you're saying because they haven't lived that life experience, there's no way that you're going to connect with that person. There's no way they're going to take you seriously. So having been in education for as long as I have, having felt, and I don't want to overcomplicate this, but having felt like a victim, in reality, the thing that I did to myself, not anyone had done to me, gives me a little bit of perspective. But the background in public education, the background in mental health counseling, which I have as well, and the background of finding my own way out with some supports, but ultimately we're all responsible for our success and failure. Finding my own way out helped me relate to where people are now, and I've been fortunate enough for people to say, you put things in a way that I can understand them, and been able to break it down pretty sequentially and step by step. So I guess that's the best answer to the question.
Mm-hmm. And that definitely helps. Anytime you take a class or anything, it helps to be able to identify and be able to understand what the person's really saying. And you can even take, for example, some of us learn math in a completely different way than other people do.
Sure. Yeah.
And I heard that you have an unusual technique to help people find their confidence. Can you share what that is?
Oh, God, I'll share it, but I'm going to say right up front, I don't. My fear is I'm a professional juggler, and it's something, I'll tell the story quickly. When I was 20 years old and I had very, very little confidence, which is to say zero confidence, I was waiting in line at a movie, as a matter of fact. I used to think it was at a party, but I thought back. I was waiting in line for a movie, and there was a guy who was in my dorm, and he happened to be, for whatever reason, he was juggling with a few of his friends, and my 20-year-old brain made the connection, because this was a popular, funny guy who got the girls, who had everything that at that point in my life I didn't have. And so I said, the 20-year-old Larry said, if I could be like Stu, that was his name, if I could be like Stu, I'll get everything I want. Stu knew how to juggle, so I made the connection. I'm going to juggle so I can be like Stu and I can have all that confidence. And I summoned up the nerve to ask him about it. And he showed me, and I kind of modified the techniques so that I started teaching it to other people. So yeah, I'm a juggler, and I'm not half bad, but more than anything else, and this is where it gets to the confidence, I train people to do something that their paradigm, their mental set said they were not able to do. And once we challenge them with something that they can do, when they said their whole lives that they couldn't, it's a challenge to do other things. But yeah, I'm a professional juggler, and I absolutely do not want that on my tombstone. That's my fear. That's not what I want to be known for, but it's kind of taking on a life of its own, Christy.
Yeah, it sounds like that for sure. So how can you expand upon that a little bit more, on how you utilize that juggling to help bring about that confidence in other people? Like you said, you teach them to do something that maybe they never have done before, and you show them that they can do something. How do you help them move forward in other parts of their life where they felt like they can't?
Okay. If you're sitting in a seminar with me, or you're reading my book, How to Juggle, or you're coaching with me, one of the first ground rules is, in fact, I'm kind of sad that my daughter's not here to validate this, but one of the first ground rules is we don't use the word can't. That's a 4-letter word. That's actually something that got the kids grounded when they were younger. But it's so pervasive in so much of the language, and of course our language determines our reality, because it's the things that we tell ourselves. It really is our narrative. But when I'm working with somebody, and juggling is one of those classic things, it's a goofy example, but it works really well, because it's one of those things that we look at the circus acts, or we look at party tricks, and we think it's this special thing that only unusually talented people can do, and it's really not. When I explain that juggling is actually easier than riding a bike or driving a car, then I validate that. It's a bit of a game changer. But when you take something that you think is only for special people, and then you break it down into a series of steps that really are not that hard, and then I'll say to someone, the only difference between juggling and brain surgery is the number of steps and the time it takes, and it really is true. I mean, brain surgery is pretty easy to the brain surgeon. It looks impossible to the rest of us, and And it's really true in terms of anything. Changing oil in a car, which to me is slow torture. But I know that I had to. I could do it. So we plug in, to answer your question, we plug in the thing that people want to do, and which is a whole other story, because most people are operating on a false set of beliefs about what they want. It's really something completely different. But we'll take the thing that they're saying that they want to do, and we'll use that model, and we'll break it down into essentially the same 5 steps that people use when they learn to juggle. And it really is a challenge to the self-limiting, self-talk nonsense that most of us walk around saying to ourselves, 24/7, even in our sleep. Mm-hmm. So that's how I use juggling, and it's been a fun ride, especially when someone says they can't, and then 10 minutes later they are, and then certain look comes into their eyes. It's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun, and what I hear you saying through all of that is it's really important to know what you want and know the steps to take to get to that, and that it takes steps. It's not something that happens overnight, and the more clarity you have on those steps, the more quickly and the more easily you're going to be able to overcome whatever it is you're going through.
Sure. And the steps themselves are, and this is a bit of a surprise to most people, but really the steps themselves, there are details. Obviously, holding a scalpel to do brain surgery is slightly different than tossing a tennis ball up in the air. But the same steps, and really starting in your comfort zone and then expanding out and then acquiring the resources and then busting the P word, paradigm, and then putting it all together. Those same steps are the same thing, no matter what it is that you're trying to do. And juggling is just an easy and quick and convenient example for most people, but really it's the same thing. It's like I said, it's just a matter of time and a matter of the complexity of the steps, but it's really no different.
Mm-hmm. I have a question for you. Do you see or know of a difference between men and women when it comes to confidence?
Oh, there's so many differences, and it really depends on what they're doing. And it's funny, Christy, when this is not in what you and I pre-discussed, but I think both of us are good about going on tangent rides when we want to. I knew from the time I was a little boy that I was going to be the father of daughters. I remember hanging out with my little friend Eric when we were 5 and 6 years old, and we were joking around and we were playing whatever 5-year-old boys play. And I told him then, I'm going to be a dad and I'm going to have little girls. And come to find out I had 2, who became in 2 very different ways, very strong, very confident kids in 2 different mediums altogether. But there are some differences. There are some traditional gender role differences where women tend to be more in the affective domain, and they feel they're more in touch with emotions, and boys are more confident in terms of their physicality. And of course, both of those things are just roles that we've decided collectively that we take on, and when we can change those at any point. So when my younger daughter Sarah picked up the juggling balls when she was 6 years old, and she was juggling in 2.5 minutes, it's not because she had this special talent. It's because no one ever told her that she wasn't supposed to learn this stuff. And when my older daughter, Jill, who is very much, I joke with her, I say she's the alpha male, when she took charge of a room full of people at a young age and she was able to exert that leadership and command, it's because she had the role models of people who did that. No one told her that she wasn't supposed to, and when she got into a place where those roles were assigned, she said, thanks, but no thanks. I know who I am, and I know what I'm capable of doing. We have more, and this is the thing. If someone asked me, what's the most important thing, we have more to unlearn than we have to actually learn, because we spend most of our time playing in the little box that we were assigned and that we were accepted. So if we can challenge some of those paradigms, if we can challenge some of those assumptions that we have at a very deep level, and do something different and break out of that, the world really starts to become unlimited.
Mm-hmm. What are some things that parents can do now who may say, maybe they're not leading their children in that yet? What are some things parents can do to help their children grow in that confidence in who they are, just as they are?
I'm going to give you a very unpopular answer to that question, Christy. The thing that parents can do to get their kids in that place is to be it themselves first. And we know this. It's the same thing that we said at the beginning. I can tell you all day what to do, and I can give you the steps, but if you're not taking me seriously, because you look at me as the guy who just says it, but doesn't live it, none of the rest of it is going to matter. Mm-hmm. The thing that parents can do, and then I'm not talking about, upending a whole lifestyle. I'm not talking about, doing something crazy like, say, learning to juggle. But I am talking about taking some risks of their own. Really, I mean, if we're talking about having a conversation with our kids, this will be a bit of an easier answer. But if you want to start empowering your kids, start listening more. We're very, and I do this with my coaching. People get a little bit nervous because they think of the typical coaching or counseling relationship as somebody who's talking at them and giving advice. And when I'm working with my folks, I'm usually doing the talking far less than 50% of the time. There's nothing as empowering as when you are willing to sit still and listen to what the person has to say and really take it in. And they tend to, once they feel that safety of being accepted, and I'm talking about our kids now, once they feel that safety of being accepted, they're going to start telling you a lot more things. And once they see you role modeling bravery and being willing to get comfortable with failure, as in not getting it right, they're going to see that it's okay. They're going to start doing some of that stuff for themselves.
Mm-hmm. You're exactly right. I mean, I have a son who's 10, and I just published my first children's story, and that is a perfect example because I was up probably like 5 days, almost all night, working on that thing because I couldn't get it to work properly. And my son would crawl down here in the middle of the night and come and give me a hug and say, "Mama, what are you doing?" And I would say, "Well, remember I had that dream about publishing a book? Sometimes it takes a little more patience than what you thought it would, and a little more perseverance." And he says, "Okay, when you're done, could you come cuddle?" And, listening to what you're saying really makes me think that even in those circumstances, your children are looking at that and saying, "She's not giving up." And
the only important thing.
Like, they see that, but at the same time, it was after that book came out and my son saw the actual physical copy. He was like so giddy. I was like, "That's so cute." And then he's like, "Do you think I could do that too, write my own book?" And I said, "You betcha you could. You want to get started?" And I think that, it totally takes you as the adult starting to overcome your own things that are going on within you. And that becomes reflective onto your children. And then your children start seeing them. They start saying, "Hey, wait a minute. Maybe I could do this too."
Sure. And when they see you do that, because if we're talking about kids, the single biggest motivator, and this is not going to surprise anyone, but probably for kids and for adults as well, the single biggest motivator is fear of rejection. Mm-hmm. And that's, they're going to be risk averse. They're not going to want to do things if they're worried about being laughed at. And as adults, if we're worried about feeling rejection. And when you put your kids in an environment, and when you put yourself in an environment where the mistakes are celebrated as part of the learning process, you're in a whole new ballgame. We work in a group of people who are publishing content. It's one of the things that we're doing. And there are different levels of skill and there are different levels of technical skill. And it's a blast to watch people not only achieve, because that's the icing on the cake, but the striving. When you place yourself, and you really do have to place yourself, it's your responsibility But when you place yourself in an environment where risk is celebrated, where mistakes are celebrated and corrected gently and with a sense of humor, and when you do that in your own family, and you do that with your own kids, and you make the decision that someone else's rejection of you is their problem and not yours, you're in a whole new ballgame, and things get a lot more fun.
And we do take a lot of other people onto ourselves.
Yep, we do. And we can look back and say it's, and there'll be truth to it. We'll look back and say it's what our parents taught us, and we'll look back and say it's what the bully in third grade taught us, and we'll look back and say it's the guy or the girl who rejected me for the high school dance taught us. And there's truth to all that, and at the same time, it's truth. It's absolutely what holds us in slavery to our own pasts. And it's funny. I connected with somebody on Facebook who I perceive as having been very harsh to me in the past, and I realized that this was a guy who put his pants on one leg at a time, and this is a guy who didn't even remember me. And here I am, and then this is a common story for many of us, holding ourselves in this place of fear of what other people are thinking, and who the heck, as adults, who the heck cares about what other people are thinking? We get to the point where, this is our lives. There's a certain number of years left before the plug gets pulled. Let's have some fun and do something now and get out of the little box.
Exactly. And I think a lot of us reach that point later in our lives. Like, I know a lot of women, it seems it's around age of 30, when you're sort of transitioning now into, it's almost like you're like second life sort of thing or something. And, coming to that point and saying, wait a minute, you're not going to live forever. You don't have endless days of possibility. And today is the only day you really get. That moment is the only really moment that you get to embrace that possibility and move forward with it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more. And it's funny that you say 30, because I'm tracking back. Most of the people I've worked with, I've done plenty of classes, but most of the people I've worked with as individuals, the largest subgroup tend to be women. Well more than 50% of the people I've worked with are women, like people I've coached, and it tends to be in that 30 to 40 age group. And I wonder if there's a biological reason for that. I got to imagine that there's some truth to that, and maybe it's just that they've decided to embrace what's possible and reject the little box that they've put themselves in, with cooperation from the culture around them.
And I think too, you start to see, I know for me, for example, I started to see my dad couldn't do all of the things he used to be able to do. He wasn't as strong as I remember him being. And he said to me, I can't believe you're 30. And then I said, if I'm 30, he's getting older too. And then it almost starts like this whole process of thinking, and you think, where have I been, but where do I want to go, and what did I really want to do? And your thinking starts to travel into a different atmosphere that maybe it hasn't traveled into before, when you start seeing those things surrounding you and those changes happening not only in your life, but in other people around you.
Oh, sure. They're a great frame of reference. My mom and dad are both in their 70s. And, of course you see the physical changes. And I watch it with my own kids, because I can remember, picking my girls up and swinging them around. And if I tried to do that now, I'd get a head slap. So it's watching them grow, and it's watching them occupy some of the roles that I occupied as a kid. And anyone who's a parent can relate to that. We can see our own aging process, but at the same time, it's a choice. I joke with my kids, I haven't decided what I want to be when I grow up yet. When that happens, I'll let you know. But we, at every moment, especially now with the technology that's available to us, you and I are talking from Canada to Connecticut in the United States right now. The technology is just, it's enabled so many new possibilities and some dangers as well, because you never know who someone actually is until you go eyeball to eyeball with them. But there are so many more possibilities that the excuses we make just get weaker and weaker by the minute.
Do you think that one of those dangers is towards confidence nowadays, especially in like kids growing up and you know, people being on the internet? You're attacked in a different way. Do you think that makes an effect on like a person's confidence too?
It certainly can. Yeah, if you don't have a very firm foundation and I don't say belief in yourself, because I think belief, I heard this. If you break down the word belief, it's be and lie. So I never talk about belief. If you don't know who you are, it's rock solid. There are plenty of opportunities to get knocked off your ball game. There are plenty. The internet is got everyone in it, and it's got everyone from the most well-grounded, loving person to the most hateful, jealous, vicious, opportunistic person, and of course everything in between. So if you're not firmly grounded in knowing how valued and valuable and worthy you are, no matter what you do, you're going to get knocked back. And if you're somebody who plays big, if you're somebody who is in marketing or is in sales or is in anything entrepreneurial where you set out with a strong personality to influence people, you're going to get knocked back on your butt. Mm-hmm. Because there are people who are going to, it's their job in the universe to criticize. And that's not don't blame them for being who they are. Hold yourself accountable for not having, and I'm not using the word blame, hold yourself accountable mm-hmm. for not having found the strength to not internalize what they're saying about you. And it is a journey, and it's different from what most of us have been living our whole lives. And it is entirely possible, no matter where you are, to reinvent yourself and to find that strength.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So you mentioned a little bit about your wife and that she's a powerful businesswoman. What do you mean by that? What does she do that you would give her that title?
If you move in the home business industry, there's about a 99% chance you've heard of Diane Hoffman. She's a trainer in the industry. She's got a few different income streams. She rubs elbows with some of the bigger players in the industry, and she's somebody, and I don't mind saying this because she said it publicly many times, who 15 years ago didn't have the confidence to look people in the eye at a restaurant and order. And she had to go through her own set of trials and tribulations to get to the point where, not only did she find the confidence, she found authority. Mm-hmm. And that authority is what you project onto other people. She found that, and she expressed that. And like I said, the authority is just a projection of that personal confidence. And it's been a roller coaster ride where, and I think this is true for many couples, where one member of the couple grows at a different rate than the other, and it's a real challenge. If you are in a couplehood and your partner grows in ways that threaten the relationship as you understand it, you get some choices. You can move, you can grow apart, or you can kind of grow together. And that's a choice that we made, and it's been magnificent to to be part of that. But and that goes for the male or the female. But she's a very powerful figure in personal development, in marketing, and in home business.
Mm-hmm. And I hear what you're saying about it is true that one usually starts that journey of change and process and becoming and all of those things, almost like blossoming like a flower. And then the other person is sort of, trudging along, but they're sort of a little stuck-ish. Sure. And it's amazing to see that when you, as a couple, stick together no matter what, and there's no plan B, and you keep working towards that, that goal of being together, how the other person starts to grow through that.
Sure. And it is, well, it's funny you say when you create a situation where there is no other choice. Well, there is another choice. There are plenty of couples who don't make it, and truthfully, there are plenty of couples who just decide at some point where what they wanted at the beginning and who they were in the beginning and what needs that relationship fulfilled are no longer there. And I can point to a lot of examples of people who are great friends and love each other very much and work together to raise kids and enjoy each other's company, who just made the decision that the marriage as they understood it no longer served their purposes and decided to end it. That's a best case scenario. Of course, it doesn't always work that way.
Right.
And a lot of the breakups are a lot more bitter than that. And then what's very common is you see couples who give each other the space. If you can think about a Venn diagram or interlocking circles where they both have their space to be who they are, and neither of the other objects to that and celebrates it. And of course, they have the space that is the interlocking circle, and that's their together time. And that's a beautiful thing, and that really is the foundation of any strong relationship, and of course a married couple and a couple who are raising kids together. That's the ultimate scenario.
I think, personally, my personal opinion is that's because you feel empowered. You feel okay that it's okay to be who you are and who you were created to be, and that you're accepted as that. And I think that helps you to grow that relationship more, even because you know that you're valid for who you are.
Yes. And this is big. I'm thinking about this when it's profound. When you find that personal strength and that confidence and you feel it within yourself, it is 1,000 times easier to celebrate it and give the other permission to find it within themselves. And of course, they don't need your permission. They're going to do it anyway. But when you can create an environment where you celebrate the growth of the other because you're no longer dependent on that person's approval, it makes it 1,000 times easier to give that approval to the other person. And of course, they get to the point where they're going with or without you. But when you can celebrate the differences, and your self-respect and your self-esteem is not dependent on anyone else's, including your partners. You want them to like you and you want them to be happy, but your sense of well-being is not dependent on whether or not they approve of you. Those are the strongest people I've met.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important to live in that too, whether you're married or single or whatever it is, to live in that who you are and what your passion is, and to go after that.
Yep. And there's a detaching process, and when I work with folks, this is a big part of it. And this is a bit unusual because when you hear most counselors and coaches and therapists talk about what do you want, that's one of the last questions that I ask. And the reason for that is because most people are operating on a set of principles where they don't think they deserve. They know how they want to feel, and that's one of the first questions I ask, which is how do you want to feel? But the analogy is if you're hungry and you've learned to subsist on a very small calorie diet, your eyes get small and you don't see things, you don't see what's possible. So I'm going to say, what would you like? And in reality, you'd love a feast, but you don't know how to process it. So I'll just take this crumb of bread. People who I work with, and most people who are just starting out, don't know what they want because they don't have a sense of what they're capable of. They know they want to feel better than they do now, and they know that they want to get out of whatever pain they're in. So I don't want anyone answering the question, what do you want, until you're feeling more capable of actually getting it.
That's a really good key, because you're right. If you don't know what it's like to feel empowered, or you don't even know what it's like to feel inspired, or you don't know what it's like to chase after your dreams, how can you do that?
Sure. And what you'll do is you'll keep going after what someone else's vision is for you, and it could be a parent who says, the classic the classic Jewish thing, my son the doctor. If you've been taught to believe your whole life that you'll only make someone else happy if you become a doctor, you may become that doctor and you'll be 10 years into the career and you'll be absolutely miserable. Or the teacher or the anything. Or if you marry young because you think you're supposed to marry because you'll make your parents happy or because you'll make society, whoever that is, happy. And then you'll look one day and you'll say, what have I done? So much of what we think we want has been to serve the needs of other people, either because you fit their needs. It's the person who's working a certain job, who's making half of what they're worth, because someone else, that's what someone else has planned for them, and they weren't strong enough to find their own plan, so they just fell into whatever there was. Or, again, that fear of rejection. You'll do whatever you think will keep you in someone's good graces, even if it goes against every fiber of your own spirit. And too many people are out there doing that, and that tends to be the folks who I wind up working with.
And I think it's really important because, we start with our children, but, and they're going to grow up and become adults too, but I think it's really important to foster that spirit of entrepreneurship, however that looks like. If that's even, making bracelets or painting someone a picture or making your own book, whatever that looks like for your child, and knowing your child is really important to know what that is and fostering that in them so that they know that it's okay to chase after your dreams and you don't have to fall into that category of I have to work for so-and-so company because, well, that's just the way things go.
Sure. And there's a lot of value, and then I'm always careful with this because most people are employees and most people do get a paycheck, and there's nothing in the world wrong with that. We need people who are going to make stuff, and as part of a team, and we need people who are going to take stuff out of the ground, and we need people who are going to, pick up the phone when we call with a problem. There's nothing in the world wrong with any of that. In fact, most people, get their identity from their occupation, and there's not a thing in the world wrong with that. It's when you're out of alignment. And there are ways to tell. When you wake up in the middle of the night in the cold sweat because you're not on your assignment, then you're doing something that's against your highest good. But when you're working that job and you feel good about that product that rolled off the assembly line, or feel good about that kid who is finally learning to write in cursive, or you feel good about that garbage pail that you just emptied, and that's divine. When somebody, we're all wired differently, and when someone can, at the end of the day, feel like what they've done is art. Seth Godin writes extensively about this. When someone feels like they're on their assignment, it doesn't matter what the thing is. They're putting their all and their love energy into it. That's the greatest thing in the world, Christy.
And I totally see that. Like using my son as an example is only because I see him as an example, and he helps me to learn and grow watching him. And ever since day one, he's always said he wants to be a police officer. He has never changed his mind. And, I think it's important, like I said, that entrepreneurial spirit is different in everyone. And it doesn't mean that you're going to work for yourself. It can mean that you're going to do a job that you love, just like you said. And, I've encouraged that in him by saying, okay, when we're at the little parade and they have like the little policeman there and he gets to try on the little outfit and to see the smile on his face and the things that he does, that's what it is.
Sure. Well, the entrepreneurial spirit, if you want to take that example to another level, is to take him to the police station and let him talk to the whoever is at the front desk. And that's entrepreneurial, because entrepreneurial isn't necessarily starting your own business. Entrepreneurial, and this is where it really connects with the confidence that we're talking about. Entrepreneurial is growing outside the box that you've placed yourself in. So if this is a kid who's going to go interview the sergeant, what it's like to be, or the dare officer, what it's like to be a police officer, or if it's the kid who's going to go spend half an hour at the firehouse and look at the pole and look at the engine, that's entrepreneurial. Anything that takes us out of the box that we've placed ourselves in, whether it's a physical, situation, whether it's a thought process, whether it's the same set of emotions that we feel over and over again, anything that takes us out of that and puts us in a different place, that's the definition of entrepreneurial.
Mm-hmm. That's totally how I see it. And it's a spirit. It's something that, like you said, when you wake up in the morning, you cannot wait to do it. I mean, I work a job right now, but I can't wait to come home and work on the things that I really love doing. And the work is totally different. You don't feel like it's work. Even though it's work, it's like fun work,
Sure. And you'll take that same energy, as long as you don't get to... Well, one of two things happens. You get so disgusted with what you're doing because it's so out of alignment with the thing that you love that it kind of inspires you to make a change. Or you take that same energy, the thing that you love, and you find the parts of what you're doing right now that are in alignment, and you start doing your job a little bit better, and you attract a whole different energy. And so while you're in process, because like I said, everything that you want to learn how to do is that 5-step process. So while you're building the skills and you're building the infrastructure, you're getting it, and the money starts rolling in, or whatever it is that you're doing to build it. It's fun, and you don't feel deprived. You feel the joy of living, even though you haven't arrived at that place that you intended to get to.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun. I mean, it's really what you decide to do with your time, and the sin is regret, because everything that we have is a learning experience. And when you take that sense of failure and you reposition it into gratitude for what you've learned how to do, you become bulletproof and you become unstoppable.
Mm-hmm. And that is when you now have not only changed your life, but now the lives around you are changing.
Yep.
And I think that's an ultimate... even just thinking about it makes me want to like jump up and down and do jumping jacks or something. Like that puts your whole entire spirit and like heart on fire.
Well, it's funny that you say jumping jacks, because there's a physicality. I mean, we're the cute little expression where spirit's having a human experience. A lot of us neglect our physicality, and we say, well, I'm this spiritual being. You know what? We live inside a body. If you're feeling the urge to do jumping jacks, you go with that urge. Protect your knees, but by all means, live inside your body and celebrate it, and respect it and take care of it. It's the only one you got.
Exactly. And it's important to do that with all aspects of it, nourishing, yes, our confidence side, but also every other facet of who we are and what makes us who we are is really important, because each one goes into the other one.
There's an expression, the way you do something is the way you do everything. And I don't buy that 100%, because I'm a pretty confident guy, and I'm pretty competent in most things. But I subcontract out pretty much every car repair short of turning the ignition switch. And it's funny because I know I can do it. I also know that the cost in terms of the time and the learning curve is not something that I'm willing to do, but it's nice to know that I can, if I needed to. But yeah, the way that we approach, especially our physical being, because it is such a big part of our existence, there's no way around it. The way we approach our physicality tends to dictate a lot of the other stuff that happens to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if you don't have that healthy body, you may not be able to go to that engagement or that conference or whatever it is that you do, go to that job that you love, because you're not capable.
Well, you always can. There's no such thing as... You would have just been grounded had you been one of my kids.
I just got grounded on the air.
Just got grounded, because cannot is the same as can't. But it's less about what you can. I mean, obviously, if you're in a wheelchair or you're bedridden, it's going to be more of a challenge. But, ask Stephen Hawking whether or not you can get around when you have a body that's not firing in all its cylinders.
You sure can. It just changes the direction you're going in.
it changes the direction, but I'm talking more about when you're taking in oxygen and when your nerve endings are firing off in a way that's healthy, and when you bend in a way that feels good, and when you go to pick up a suitcase, you do it well. That's the confidence. You don't have to have 6% body fat to do that, and you don't have to be an Adonis to do that. You just have to have a partnership with your body and enjoy the parts that work, and celebrate the parts that you haven't figured out how to get working the way you'd like them to yet, rather than beat yourself up for what you haven't done. Mm-hmm. And that might be a more gender-specific thing for women than it is for men.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure I want to touch that one with the 10-foot pole either, but
we'll just leave it at that for right now. That's a whole nother topic. So you have a background in counseling, yet most people think of you as a coach. Can you just let us know before we have to end, what are the main differences between those two?
Well, professionally, coaching is kind of the Wild West right now, even with the accrediting bodies. Counseling, if you're a counselor, you usually have a degree in counseling and you usually have some kind of certification. But I'm certified in Connecticut as a counselor, and I have a master's degree in counseling. But coaching, and this may be an oversimplification, but coaching tends to be around a specific topic. You want to get coached in business. You want to get coached in weight loss. You want to get coached in XYZ, where it's more of a I think of basketball as a really good example. You're getting coached by somebody who is your mentor and your supporter, whereas I see counseling as a bit more of an intimate relationship where it can be more global, and it tends to you tend to start in one place and go into a different place where the relationship takes you, where if you come in with a specific problem or a specific challenge and you peel back a layer or two and you realize that this is a bit deeper, that's where I see counseling. And of course it's not always that way, and some of the best coaches I know really do get to the root of a problem and do that well. But that's where I see the biggest difference, where coaching is a little bit more specific to an issue, and counseling tends to be a bit more multifaceted.
Do you also find that coaching is more action-orientated rather than internal focused in that way?
You can put it this way. I know many counselors who are happy to park, and apologies to my profession, but I know many counselors who are happy to park somebody on their couch for 45 or 50-minute sessions and let them go on forever, and years later nothing's changed. That makes my skin crawl. That I think is unprofessional. The best counselors that I know are action-oriented, where there's stuff, you have to be in the right emotional and mental space to do it. But the minute you're able to do something, the minute you have, and I owe myself a grounding now too, because we're always able, but the minute you're ready to do something, you jump on it. You sit on anything that you've learned, and you go to parties and you talk about it, and you go to training after training after training, and you just keep getting trained on it. That's nonsense. That's not any kind of life quality that I would want. Real counselors are going to take the stuff that they're teaching and they're going to say, and go. We don't sit, the good ones don't have folks sit on stuff. We jump into action.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that's, like a misconception with a lot of people. Because I've known people who say to me, well, isn't a coach like someone who gets you to do stuff and a counselor just listens to you?
That's counseling's own fault. That that's a poor old Sigmund Freud started that years ago, and we're still trying to recover. But good counseling is action oriented. The minute the person is ready to take the action, it's not action for its own sake. It's getting you emotionally and mentally and physically ready to do stuff, and then jumping into it.
And what do you think the importance of having a coach for a specific thing is? How important is that if you want to go forward?
Well, anything that you want to do. I joke about this. I like to be the dumbest person in the room whenever possible. I like to see, and it's fortunate that I'm married to someone who's a lot smarter than I am, so that frequently. But it's if you're working with a coach, that coach is they know stuff that you don't necessarily know, and they know how to do stuff that you don't necessarily how to do. And they understand that you're at a lesser stage of development. So it goes back to what we talked about in the first place, which is role modeling. I can tell you how to do something all day, and I can cheerlead you, and every time you make a step in that right direction, I'll put up my pom-poms and we'll yell, yay me. But if they're doing it alongside you, and they're doing it at a pace that when I teach someone to juggle, I don't, throw 3 balls up in the air and then hand them off and say, go. We really do break it down into discrete steps. And real coaching is going to do that same thing. It's going to take you one step beyond what you know how to do and just a little bit out of your comfort zone. And it's going to coax you out of that place until you've learned something new. And it's going to drag you out of that comfort zone again. You do a little celebration for what you know. And then as soon as you're ready, and maybe even a little bit before you're ready, you get dragged right back out. And you do your thing. And that's what coaching is for.
And I think, too, when you're headed in that right direction, that uncomfortableness that you feel is part of the thing that's showing you, keep going.
You betcha.
Keep doing it. Keep working on it, because we're going to push through this wall, and you're going to see the magnificent landscape in front of you.
Absolutely.
That just opened up.
Absolutely. And you're going to embrace the discomfort. You're not going to fear the discomfort. You're going to welcome it. That's the biggest difference.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of us try and avoid that discomfort, because who likes to feel like that?
Right. Well, we do, because we know
exactly, but we know what's on the other side.
Right. And we enjoy the journey. And it goes back to the discomfort is less about the discomfort and more about the fear of what other people are going to think of you. And when you can get rid of that fear, it's a game changer.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So before we end, I want to make sure that you get your information out there for everybody who wants to connect with you. So what are some ways people can connect with you, and website information and those kinds of things?
Go find me at nomoreholdingback.com. It's all spelled regularly, nomoreholdingback.com. Please sign up for my free course. It's Breaking the 7 Barriers to Success. It's right on the blog. It's right on the site. I got some books that are available there. I've got an audio series that's available there. But you know what? Let's develop the relationship from a distance, and if things move in a way that makes sense to both of us, let's get a little bit closer.
I would totally love that. I've had an amazing time today just listening to you and speaking with you, and I know that our listeners are going to learn a lot from the little tidbits that you've given. Can you give one last tidbit on confidence before we go?
I'm gonna use my tagline. Confidence is usually quiet, but it sure knows how to party.
I love that. That's awesome.
With the process, and don't feel like you have to be anything to anyone. And it usually comes when you least expect it.
That's beautiful. Thank you very much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here, Christy. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And so everyone, make sure you visit his site and get your free e-course. As well, don't forget to email me at contact@ChristyLeeTritz if you or someone you know would like to be a part of the life-changing book, A Woman's Voice. Thank you very much for listening today. We appreciate you.
Thank you for joining Christy Lee and her guests on the show today. Tune in to A Woman's Voice, Empowerment Radio, every Thursday at 1 Mountain Standard Time. This station is made possible by generous donations made by our listeners. To donate, please visit ChristyLeeTritz.com and keep helping us share women's voices. Have a blessed day full of inspiration.